On April 16th, 1846, 9 covered wagons left Springfield, Illinois, on the 2,500-mile journey to California, in what would become one of the greatest tragedies in the history of the westward migration. This is the tragic story of the Donner Party. I'm Alexander Dartarian.
And I'm Dominic Sykes.
And this is the Dartarian Show. On April 16th, 1846, 9 covered wagons left Springfield, Illinois, on the 2,500-mile journey to California, in what would become one of the greatest tragedies in the history of the westward migration. This is the tragic story of the Donner Party. I'm Alexander Dartarian.
And I'm Dominic Sykes.
And this is the Dartarian Show.
So I always thought that, I don't know why, but I didn't picture, when I've heard stories, because I've heard about the Donner Party before, but I've always pictured like a station, a family of station wagons or something like that. And I didn't actually think of it as,
being
horse and wagon, like covered wagons.
Yeah. It's kind of weird because when you say the Donner Party, you do think of it like being in recent history and stuff. But no, it's pretty much their way to the Oregon Trail kind of thing, westward, trying to make their way to the gold rush and everything.
Manifest Destiny, all that good stuff.
Yeah. So the originator of this group was a man named James Fraser Reed, an Illinois businessman eager to build a greater fortune in the rich land of California.
Like a lot of people.
Yeah. Reed also hoped that his wife, Margaret, who suffered from terrible headaches, might improve in the coastal climate. Reed had recently read the book Immigrant's Guide to Oregon and California by Lansford W. Hastings, who advised a new shortcut across the Great Basin.
Oh, yep, I'm already messed up there. Shortcuts.
Yep. There is no shortcuts in life.
Uh-huh.
This new route enticed travelers by advertising that it would save the pioneers 350 to 400 miles on easy terrain. However, what was not known by Reed was that the Hastings route had never been tested. Written by Hastings, who had visions of building an empire at Sutter's Fort, now Sacramento, it was this falsified information that would lead to the doom of the Donner Party.
That's messed up. You didn't even have fake news back then.
Yeah, absolutely. Reed soon found others seeking adventure and fortune in the vast West, including the Donner family, Graves, Breens, Murphys, Eddies, McCutcheons, Kesselbergs, and the Wolflingers, as well as 7 teamsters and a number of bachelors. The initial group included 32 men, women, and children. With James and Margaret Reed were their 4 children, Virginia, Patty, James, and Thomas, as well as Margaret's 70-year-old mother, Sarah Keyes, and 2 hired servants. Though Sarah Keyes was so sick with consumption that she could barely walk, she was unwilling to be separated from her only daughter. However, the successful Reed was determined his family would not suffer on the long journey, as his wagons were extravagant 2-story affair with a built-in iron stove, spring-cushioned seats, and bunks for sleeping.
Wow, they're like a luxury RV of the time.
Taking 8 oxen to pull this luxurious wagon, Reed's 12-year-old daughter, Virginia, dubbed it the Pioneer Palace Car. And 9 brand new wagons, the group estimated the trip would take 4 months to cross the plains, deserts, mountain ranges, and rivers in their quest for California. Their first destination was Independence, Missouri, the main jumping-off point for the Oregon and California
I was
trails.
gonna say, isn't that where you start an Oregon Trail, the game?
Yep,
So-
that is. And like I said, like pretty much people were going to Oregon
Yeah.
and then California. They were two different trails.
Right.
So a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah.
They just figured the Oregon Trail, you just got there and they just went down from to California. But they were
Or
two.
split off at some point.
Yeah. Also in the group were the families of George and Jacob Donner. George Donner was a successful 62-year-old farmer who had migrated 5 times before settling in Springfield, Illinois, along with his brother Jacob. Obviously, adventurous, the brothers decided to make one last trip to California, which unfortunately would be their last.
Yeah.
With George was his third wife, Tamzine, their 3 children, Francis, Georgia, and Eliza, and George's 2 daughters from a previous marriage, Alicia and Liliana. Jacob Donner and his wife Elizabeth brought their 5 children, George, Mary, Isaac, Samuel, and Louis, as well as Mrs. Donner's 2 children from a previous marriage, Solomon and William Hook. William Hook?
William Hook.
Captain Hook?
I guess.
Also along with them were the 2 teamsters, Noah James and Samuel Shoemaker, as well as a friend named John Denton. At the bottom of Jacob Donner's saddlebag was a copy of Lansfield Hastings' Immigrant Guide,
Yep. The
With
one
the-
that's misleading.
with its tantalizing talk of a faster route to the Garden of the Earth.
Mm-hmm.
Ironically, on that very day that that the Illinois party headed west from Springfield, Lansford Hastings prepared to head east from California to see what the shortcut he had written about was really like.
No.
How do you write a book
And not even test to make sure that the route is right.
and then like, oh, I better go check to see if this shortcut's really viable?
Oh my God.
So the wagon train reached Independence, Missouri about 3 weeks later, where they were supplied. The next day, on May 12th, 1846, they headed west again in the middle of a thunderstorm.
And then 3 of them died of dysentery.
Or yeah, this is where you're like, oh, Paul
time
has
to hunt?
Yeah. A week later, they joined a large wagon train captained by Colonel William H. Russell that was camped on Indian Creek about 100 miles west of Independence. Along the entire journey, others would join the group until their size numbered 87.
Oh, wow.
On May 25th, the train was held for several days by a high water at the Big Blue River near present-day Marysville, Kansas.
Sorry, I don't mean to keep interrupting you, but I feel like people were more trustful of strangers back then.
I think you had to be really...
Like you could take go on a trip with a wagon, right, and then come across another couple families that are on the same trip, and you kind of just merge into one big caravan, and people just got along.
I think it was more for protection.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So it was just like the bigger a group we are, the less time,
you
they'll mess with us and stuff. And it was here that the train would experience its first death.
Uh-oh.
When Sarah Keyes died and was buried next to the river. After building ferries to cross the water, the party was on their way again, following the Platte River for the next month.
Huh.
So-
So finally, the consumption ended up taking its toll. Huh?
Which I didn't really know what consumption was until like very recently.
Yeah. Like all throughout school, I'd heard about it. But
Yeah, it's tuberculosis.
yeah, I didn't know that.
No, I didn't either. Why didn't they just call it
Just-
tuberculosis? It's just weird. It's like, I guess it's one of those things that has different names for stuff.
Yeah.
Along the way, William Russell resigned as the captain of the wagon train, and the position was assumed by a man named William M. Boggs. Encountering few problems along the trail, the pioneers reached Fort Laramie just 1 week behind schedule on June 27th, 1846.
Mm-hmm.
At Fort Laramie, James Reed ran into an old friend from Illinois by the name of James Clyman, who had just traveled in the new route eastwardly with Lansford Hastings. Clyman advised Reed not to take the Hastings route.
Oh, see, now they were warned.
Yeah. Stating that the road was barely passable on foot and would be possible with wagons.
Yeah.
Also warning him of the Great Desert and the Sierra Mountains. So not only is there a desert, you can't cross it by anything but foot,
Yeah.
and the Sierra Nevada Mountains,
Yeah.
which are the Rocky Mountains.
Yeah. This is the whole. Yeah. It just seems to me like this dude really screwed these people over bad with his book.
Yeah. Though he strongly suggested that the party take the regular wagon trail rather than his new false route, Reed would later ignore his warning in an attempt to reach their destination more quickly. Joined by other wagons and in Fort Laramie, the pioneers were met by a man carrying a letter from Lansford W. Hastings at the Continental Divide on July 11th.
Mm-hmm.
The letter stated that Hastings would meet the immigrants at Fort Bridger and lead them on his cutoff, which passed south of Great Salt Lake, instead of detouring northwest via Fort Hall, present-day Pocatello, Idaho. The letter successfully allayed any fears that the party might have had regarding the Hastings cutoff.
Great.
On July 19th, the wagon train arrived at the Sandy River in present-day Wyoming, where the trail parted into two routes: the northerly known route, and the untested Hastings cutoff. Here, the train split, with the majority of the large caravan taking the safer route.
Being smart, yeah.
Yeah. The group, preferring the Hastings route, elected George Donner as their captain. Want to support the show? There are several ways to do that. One is to give us a 5-star rating to help people find us. Another is to become a patron of our show. We also have a store where we have amazing merch designed by Ashton Green and Coda. Follow the link in the description below and enjoy the episode. And soon began the southerly route, reaching Fort Bridger on July 28th. However, upon the arrival of Fort Bridger of Lansford Hastings, there was no sign. Only a note left for other immigrants resting at the fort. The note indicated that Hastings had left with another group, and the later travelers should follow to catch up. Jim Bridger and his partner, Louis Vasquez, assured the Donner Party that the Hastings cutoff was a good route.
Oh, wow.
Satisfied, the immigrants rested for a few days at the fort, making repairs to their wagon and preparing for the rest of what they thought would be a 7-week journey. On July 31st, the party left Fort Bridger, joined by the McCullough family. The group now numbered 74 people and 20 wagons, and for the first week made good progress at 10 to 12 miles per day. On August 6th, the party reached the Weber River after having passed through Echo Canyon. Here, they came to a halt when they found a note from Hastings advising them not to follow him down the Weber Canyon,
Well, at least he did that.
as it was virtually impassable, but rather take another trail through the Salt Basin. So he didn't say, hey, don't
go this route.
He said, just go around the Salt Basin.
Okay.
While the party camped near the modern-day Hennifer, Utah, James Reed, along with 2 other men, forged ahead on horses to catch up with Hastings, finding the party at the south shore of the Great Salt Lake. Hastings accompanied Reed partway back to point out the new route, which he said would take them about 1 week to travel. In the meantime, the Graves family caught up with the Donner Party, which now numbered 87 people and 23 wagons. Taking a vote among the party members, the group decided to try the new trail rather than backtracking to Fort Bridger.
Great.
Which they probably really should have done.
Yeah, they should have backtracked. 100%.
On August 11th, the wagon train began the arduous journey through the Watash Mountains, clearing trees and other obstructions along the new path of their journey. In the beginning, the wagon train was likely to make even 2 miles per day, taking them 6 days to travel 8 miles.
Wow.
Along the way, they discovered that some of their wagons would have to be abandoned, and before long, morale began to sink, and the pioneers began to adamantly blame Lansford Hastings.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, it was his fault. By the time they reached the shore, they also blamed James Reed. On August 25th, the caravan lost another member, one Luke Harlan, who died of consumption near present-day
great.
Grantsville, Utah.
Another
This
one.
is just like our Oregon Trail.
Yeah.
About this time, fear began to set, as provisions were running low and time was against them. In the 21 days since reaching the Weber River, they had moved just 36 miles.
Oh, my goodness.
5 days later, on August 30th, the group began to cross the Great Salt Lake Desert, believing the trek would only take them 2 days.
Yeah, right.
According to Hastings. However, what they didn't know was that the desert sand was moist and deep, where the wagons quickly got bogged down,
Yep.
severely slowing their progress. On the third day in the desert, their water supply was nearly exhausted,
Oh, no.
and some of Reed's oxen ran away. Oxen? Oxen.
Yeah.
I think it's just oxen, not oxens.
Mm-hmm.
When they finally reached the end of the grueling desert 5 days later, on September 4th, the immigrants rested near the base of Pilot Peak for several days.
Mm-hmm.
On their 80-mile journey through the Salt Lake Desert, they had lost a total of 32 oxen.
That's ridiculous.
Yes. Reed was forced to abandon 2 of his wagons, and the Donners as well, as a man named Louis Kieselberg lost 1 wagon each. On the far side of the desert, an inventory of food was taken and found to be less than adequate for a 600-mile trek still ahead.
Oh, my gosh.
Ominously, snow powdered the mountain peaks that very night. They reached the Humbert River on September 26th.
I'd start panicking about now if I were them.
Yeah, this is
we can't
scary.
turn back now because
Yeah.
we got to go right back around that the desert,
Yeah,
and we're still 600 miles away from.
they're past the point of no return.
Yeah, exactly. And then so it's either go forward or die.
Realizing that the difficult journey through the mountains and the desert had depleted their supplies, 2 of the young men traveling with the party, William McCutcheon and Charles Stanton, were sent ahead to Sutter's Fort, California, to bring back supplies.
Mm-hmm.
From September 10th to the 25th, the party followed the trail into Nevada around the Ruby Mountains, finally reaching the Hulbert River on September 26th. It was here that the new trail met up with Hastings' original path. Having traveled an extra 125 miles through the strenuous mountain terrain and dry desert, this disillusioned party's resentment of Hastings, and ultimately Reed, was increased tremendously.
Gee, I wonder why.
The Donner Party soon reached the junction with the California Trail about 7 miles west to present-day Elko, Nevada, and spent the next 2 weeks traveling along the Humbert River. As the disillusionment of the party increased, tempers began to flare in the group.
Yep.
On October 5th, at Iron Point, 2 wagons became entangled, and John Snyder, a teamster of one of the wagons, began to whip his oxen.
Oh, wow.
Infuriated by the teamster's treatment of the oxen, James Reed ordered the man to stop. When he wouldn't, Reed grabbed his knife and stabbed the teamster in his stomach, killing him. The Donner Party wasted no time in administering their own justice. Though member Louis Kieselberg favored hanging for James Reed, the group instead voted to banish him. Leaving his family, Reed was last seen riding off to the west with a man named Walter Heron.
Wonder if he ever made it.
The Donner Party continued to travel along the Humbert River, with the remaining draft animals exhausted. To spare the animals, everyone who could walk walked. 2 days after the Snyder killing, on October 7th, Louis Kieselberg turned out a Belgian man named Hartkoop, who had been traveling with him. The old man, who could not keep up with the rest of the party, with severely swollen feet, began to knock on other wagon doors, but no one would let him in.
Oh, that's messed up, dude.
He was last seen sitting under a large sagebush, completely exhausted, unable to walk, worn out, and was left there to die.
Yeah, he definitely. That's really messed up.
Yeah. The terrible ordeals of the caravan continued to mount when October 12th, their oxen were attacked by Paiute Indians, killing 21 of them with poison-tipped arrows,
Oh no.
further depleting their draft animals. Continuing to encounter multiple obstacles, on October 16th, they reached the gateway to the Sierra Nevada on the Ticra River, present-day Reno. Almost completely depleted of food supplies, miraculously, just 3 days later, on October 19th, one of the men the party had sent on to Fort Sutter, Charles Stanton, returned laden with 7 mules loaded with beef and flour, 2 Indian guides, and a news of a clear but difficult path through the Sierra Nevada mountains.
That's good. That's some good news at least.
Yeah. Stanton's partner, William McCutcheon, had fallen ill and remained at the fort. The caravan camped for 5 days, 50 miles from the summit, resting their oxen and for their final push. The decision to delay the departure was yet one of many that would lead to their tragedy.
Oh no.
On October 28th, an exhausted James Reed arrived at Sutter's
I guess
Fort,
that answers my question.
where he met William McCutcheon, now recovered, and the two men began preparations to go back to their families.
Well, I mean, he's banished, so.
Yeah. In the meantime, while the wagon train continued continued at the base of the summit, George Donner's wagon axle broke, and he fell behind the rest of the party. 22 people consisting of the Donner family and their hired men stayed behind while the wagon was repaired.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, while cutting timber for a new axle, a chisel slipped and Donner cut his hand badly, causing the group to fall further behind.
Yep. I'd probably get infected and have all kinds of other issues too.
Yep. As a result, the party continued to what is now known as Donner's Lake. Snow began to fall. Stanton and the 2 Indians who were traveling ahead made it as far as the summit, but could go no farther. Hopeless, they retraced their steps where 5 feet of new snow had already fallen.
Man.
With the Sierra Pass just 12 miles ahead, the wagon train, after attempting to make the pass through the heavy snow, finally retreated to the eastern end of the lake, where level ground and timber was abundant.
Mm-hmm.
At the lake stood one existing cabin, and realizing they were stranded, the group built 2 more cabins, sheltering 59 people in hopes that the early snow would melt, allowing them to continue their travels.
Otherwise, I'll be there all throughout winter.
Yeah. And that's where we'll pick back up for part 2 of the Donner Party.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.